Do you have any other books that you are excited about talking about, or have they kind of all sort of led to the last one that you put out?
Well, it really kind of all started almost a year ago with the very first one that I put out. The book is called Beyond Your Wardrobe, Finding Freedom and Embracing God's Call to Modesty and Unfading Beauty. Modesty is a topic I have been passionate about really probably since about college.
Mm-hmm.
I had done a lot of research on it, and I just come to realize that like what our cultural misunderstanding about what modesty is, both within culture at large, but also within the church. And really kind of one of the questions that I wanted to address with the book is the question, is modesty all about the clothes we wear? And I think that the answer is a resounding no. That it's really, a lot of it has to do with the whole of our physical presentation, which, yes, the clothing we choose to wear is a portion of that. But another part of that is kind of our attitude or our physical demeanor. And really that will impact the choices we make about our clothing. And so the book really kind of starts out by breaking down the lies that we believe about modesty and physical beauty in our culture. And then it goes into breaking down a lot of the scriptures that actually talk about modesty in some fashion or another, and what they have to teach us about it. And then it's kind of, once you put aside the lies of the culture and see what the Bible says and kind of start seeing all that, a phrase that I use is looking at it through the lens of the cross. Once you start doing all that, then you're able to actually break down how we can apply that to our closets.
When you talk about like a physical demeanor, to explain a little bit more about that, because that's interesting.
It's about the way that you present yourself. Modesty is actually a synonym to the word humility, and I believe that the way that we present ourselves should be a humility that's meant to bring glory back to God. That's kind of where I'm getting at with that.
Interesting. I guess I'm wondering. I'm trying to think like what it like how practically like what is that? How does that present it? Like when you talk about it in terms of not the clothing that you wear, but just like in your physical presence. Like what, like in a practical way, like what I'm trying, like what would be a good example of a positive outlook, I guess that's kind of what I'm asking, because I think that idea is really interesting. Like, do you sort of mean like in terms of like the attitude that you present to the people around you, like in terms of like your outlook or like that kind of thing, or is it something different than that?
It's kind of the concept of making sure your insides and your outsides match each other in a sense. I really think about one of the stories that I break down, kind of talking about scriptures that teach us about modesty, is 1 Samuel 16:7, which is when Samuel is going to pick David inevitably to being the next king of Israel. And he initially looks at David's oldest brother Eliab and, looks at him and says, oh, he's this, he's a handsome looking guy. He surely must be the Lord's anointed. And God said, don't consider his appearance or his height. I've rejected him, which is actually interesting, because when I did my research, I went back and looked up what happened when King Saul got chosen. And it actually mentions that he was tall and handsome. And it's actually kind of an interesting thing to realize that God had to kind of teach Samuel the prophet a lesson to say, I know that, the last king was kind of something to look at, but the guy that I'm about to choose may not fit that mold. I'm going to choose him because of his heart, not his height. And so that's just something that I think is a really important lesson for all of us to learn, is that, God doesn't look at the outward appearance. God looks at the heart. And how we present ourselves on the outside reflects what's going on the inside. And I think especially when it comes to women, the book is primarily addressed to women, although I do address some male topics throughout. But I think especially when it comes to women, the way that they present themselves either communicates the fact that they don't know the value that they have in God's eyes, or just completely unaware of it, or they know about it and they have chosen to disregard it, like when, they dress immodestly. Just because I personally believe that if you really have taken to heart what Jesus did for you on the cross, your wardrobe is actually going to reflect that. One of my highlight quotes from the book is, at one point I say, if you believe that Jesus died for you, then you are going to want to dress like Jesus died for you. And your desire to do that is going to be out of gratitude for what Jesus did for you on the cross, not out of obligation to follow a list of rules in order to earn his favor. And I think that it's once you get to that point that you're able to actually go into your closet with the right attitude and say, this is modest, this isn't modest. But I think so many people, like a lot of the books I've read about modesty, kind of come at it from almost from the wardrobe angle first and don't really address the heart issues. That was really one of the biggest reasons I wanted to write the book in the first place. So
I guess what I'm gathering is you're wanting to approach it less from like a legalism standpoint, which is sort of whether it was meaning to or not. I mean, I feel like a lot of legalism is not meant to be legalism, but when we were growing up, I guess you and I are about the same age. So when we were growing up, it all kind of felt like that stuff always felt like it was coming from like a legalistic standpoint, but you're wanting to approach it from a perspective of, well, like why, like what is the actual like importance of these things, and once you kind of your finger on why these things are of importance, then from there you can make actual like you can make decisions based on something rather than, well, I was told I shouldn't wear this because it shows skin, or you know what I mean? Like, is that sort of a good reading of what you're talking about?
Yeah, it is. I just feel like they need to have a heart motivation behind it instead of just giving them a huge list of do's and don'ts, because that has not worked. Like when the church tries to do that, it fails, and it just makes them hate the concept of modesty. And
I think the perspective that you're providing, I feel like why it's not as prominent is because it lends itself more, and I'm just completely making this up. This might not actually be true when I say I think this is why. This is my opinion. I think that it's because if you allow people to kind of make those judgment calls for themselves, then you can have no like hard and fast rule of like, okay, well that piece of clothing is not good, this piece of clothing is good, because you're kind of you're giving each person their own like personal like, well, I've considered these things and here is like where I land on that. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. I mean, toward the end of the book, I do get into practical tips about like testing your outfits and making sure that they're functional, which is something that, again, I don't feel like enough people that talk about modesty talk about. They're like always like, is it too tight? Is it too revealing? Is it too short? When I think that it's just as important to make sure that your outfit is going to function throughout the day. Yeah, I'm surprised that more people don't talk about that either. But
right. I think this topic has always been interesting to me because, I mean, again, like going back to like the culture that you and I grew up in. And when I say culture, I mean like the church culture that you and I grew up in.
Yeah.
And sort of seeing the way that failed in a lot of ways. But I don't know. People are always so quick to because, I mean, you're right. That was basically a miserable failure. The way that was pitched to all of us growing up.
Yeah, it was very much tied into the purity movement. That was a huge thing at the time. That
right.
Not everything they were trying to push was bad, but
right.
Especially I Kiss Dating Goodbye being at the forefront of that, and now Joshua Harris isn't even a Christian anymore.
That stuff is tough for me because I don't know. I see people like just so down on all of it now, and yeah, like Josh Harris is a good example of that. But to me, it's always like, yeah, don't put these people on a pedestal because like this is what happens. You know what I mean? Like, for one thing, but then for two, like I think there was good information in those books. I don't think it was all right. I think it definitely went too far or whatnot. Like if you took everything sort of to its natural conclusion, but I think that like on a macro level, like, yeah, like that's good. And if you didn't like just read every line of it and just be like, yes, and I'll follow this and I'll follow this and I'll follow, like the ideas in there, like it helped me. Like I got good information. I never, I dated one girl and we got married. I've kissed one person, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't regret those things. I think that I'm glad about those things.